Board meetings traditionally were affairs that consisted mostly of presentations, followed by a smattering of discussion. The days of full-blown presentations during the board meeting are mostly behind us. In its place, a hybrid approach has emerged where a more lengthy deck is included in the board materials, but only a few slides are shown during the meeting itself. Some boards have modernized their process to be like this, some haven't. Today on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek. I'm a big fan of yous. As a corporate secretary, you play a key role in what information the board receives. This includes knowing the art of the presentation. Without someone guiding the process, boards can be overwhelmed by dense, hard to understand, excruciating presentations. Here are 9 things you need to know about board presentations. 1. Use guidelines and templates. 2. Minimize PowerPoint at the meeting. 3. Include only for good reasons. 4. Don't be too skeletal. 5. Enforce delivery deadlines. 6. Know who drives the clicker. 7. Hold an old hands meeting. 8. Conduct a dry run. 9. Manage the oral presentation. 1. Use guidelines and templates. So you absolutely need presentation guidelines that you share with people when they're putting together a presentation for the board. It could be a one-pager, that's fine. And you'll have the regulars, the CFO and the general counsel who will present almost at every meeting. They don't need the guidance, they know the drill. But sometimes you're going to have a topic that isn't a traditional one, and the person who's presenting for it may not be seasoned in the craft of going before the board. They likely won't know exactly what directors are looking for. They might realize how board meetings work, but it's not about them, it's about the board. It can be intimidating. So most companies have a template that everyone is required to use when they're putting together a deck. They limit the number of slides that can be in the deck or limit the number of words on the slide. It's your job to vet the presentations for adherence to these guidelines, particularly to balance the density and length against being too skeletal or too brief. 2. Minimize PowerPoint at the meeting. So in the past, boarding meetings were consumed by a lot of lengthy PowerPoints that ate up most of the meeting's time. And it was a highly regimented process with occasional Q&A. That has radically changed for the most part. Now the board gets their decks in advance and the meeting time is mostly reserved for discussion. At least that's what's happening for good boards. So ideally you only put up a few slides at the meeting, the ones that really matter, the ones that drive real discussion. So the deck that the board receives in the board materials is considerably longer than what is displayed at the meeting. Not all boards have gone this far, and some still have lengthy slideshows from what I hear, but I feel and I feel for those directors. On the other hand, some boards don't even allow any presentations anymore at the meeting whatsoever. Some even have gone too far and don't even allow decks in the board meeting, in the board materials themselves. 3. Include only for good reason. So for the longer decks that are included in the board materials, enforce the principle of what is this, why am I getting it, and what do you want me to do with it? In other words, before just sticking a deck in the board materials, ask those 3 things. Why is this presentation being given? What are we trying to tell the board? What are we trying to get out of the board? Make these 3 things clear up front to the person putting the deck together. And have them answer those questions on the cover page. Give guidance to the directors about what's this deck all about. Tell the directors, we want you to decide X based on this deck, or this deck is informational only because we will be deciding X at the meeting after this. Otherwise, the directors are just sitting there wondering what they should be doing with the deck. So don't allow someone to include a deck just because we always do it, without first stopping to consider, do we still need to be doing this presentation? Has it run its course? If not, it falls in the show and tell category and it's just time to get rid of it. 4, don't be too skeletal. So you don't want the deck to be too dense. In contrast, you also do not want the deck to fall in love with bullets. Don't be bullet happy. The purpose of bullet points is to create a laundry list. That format works in some settings, but not all of them, not others. It can be challenging to decipher what you're really trying to say if it's just a list of bullets. So a deck can easily get too skeletal, and you need to make sure that the information is clear. Sometimes you need to use full sentences, maybe even full paragraphs, to ensure that directors are getting all the information that you want them to get. Eliminate any jargon and acronyms, company and industry specific. This is part of being clear. If jargon is integral to what your company does, provide directors with a dictionary, an index of some sort that they can refer to. 5, enforce delivery deadlines. So set due dates to give enough time for internal reviews to happen before you're posting a deck to the portal. And inevitably, people are going to say, this meeting is not being held until a month from now. Why do you need my first draft in a week? Plus, everything changes, so I can't give it to you that early. Tell those people that this is just a draft so that the CEO can get a feel for what you're going to be presenting. Your final deck won't be collected until sometime after that. That might be a lie, but you're going to get them moving. Remember that you need time for posting to the portal, not much, but bake that, into your buffer room so that you have time to do this. One last note. I know that at some companies, some or all of the decks aren't given to directors in advance. The CEO might want to guide a discussion and that they don't want directors to know too much about up front. Or maybe your senior managers are bad at making deadlines and they're playing around with their slides up until the last minute. In that case, tell the directors that the slides will be posted on the portal after the meeting in case they want to go back to refer to them. 6, know who drives the clicker. It's a minor logistical point, but it's important. Sometimes people get hung up on who drives the clicker, so be clear in advance about who will have that clicker in their precious little hands and can move the slides along. 7, hold an all hands meeting. Hold an all hands meeting. So even if you don't have a rehearsal, many companies have an all hands meeting with the CEO in advance of the board meeting. At that meeting, right before the materials go out, you walk through all the materials, all the presentations. You don't rehearse what people are going to say, but talk about what might come up, what might be confusing, and what questions directors might ask. 8, conduct a dry run. So particularly if a presenter is new, try to have a run through to ensure that they're hitting their key points. The rehearsal might be with a big group or it just might be between you and the presenter. Don't let the presenters read the slides. Tell them if they do that, you're going to stand up and interrupt their presentation during the board meeting and end it right then and there. So let me repeat that. Remind presenters not to read their slides. You can't tell them that enough because when they're in the room and they get nervous, they're just going to revert to their old bad habits and read the slides. So drum it into their heads. Hopefully your presenter is smart and plan on displaying only 1 or 2 slides at the meeting so that they can focus on 3 or 4 essential points that they want to get across, and that they should plan on being interrupted, that time's going to run out. So tell them to get the good stuff out right away because they're going to get asked questions and they're not going to be able to get to that other stuff at the back end. Also try to coach your presenters about the kinds of questions that they might get from particular directors based on your understanding of those people, what kind of things they like to focus on. So you know the board, the presenters probably don't. They may or they may not. If the presenter puts something in their deck that's going to cause one of your directors who has a special interest in some area to start asking questions that may be a little bit off topic, off point, warn the presenter. Maybe even help them tweak their slides to avoid this risk. You only have a bucket of time at the board meeting and you don't want it to go awry. Tell your presenters that interruptions by the directors during their presentation is a good thing and that they should expect them. In fact, if directors are not interrupting a presenter, it's a sign that things might not be going very well. Directors should really be getting in there with their question. Otherwise, perhaps they're not getting it, they're not engaged, they're not listening. 9, manage the oral presentation. So for presenters who are not regulars, include their bio in the board materials, but also briefly explain their role as they're introduced to make their presentation, where they fit in the grand scheme of things. As part of this introduction, the problem, the convincing reason that led to the need for the presentation in the first place should be clearly stated. After that, it would be helpful to posit the answer at the outset so that the board doesn't have to wait to understand where this presentation is headed, where it's going. Instead, the board can test the recommendation over the course of the presentation. Since each presentation is allotted a specific time slot, be ready to interrupt and ask for questions if the presenter seems to not be aware that time is flying by and directors should now be permitted to ask questions. When a presentation is going on, you should read the room. Listen to what the presenter is saying. Look at the directors to observe their body language. Are they interested and engaged? Or are they playing on their iPad? If so, get ready to interrupt. For newish presenters afterwards, give them feedback, honest feedback, so that they can improve for next time.